Hello, everybody. Welcome to What the Frick Live right here on 107.7 FM New Orleans. I am your host, Emily Menshouse, and I have another amazing host with me, Rick Dunn. Hi, Rick. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. This is our first show on 107.7 FM.
Oh, God, so exciting. Hello, everybody.
Yes, hello, everybody. And we are also streaming live via video on all kinds of Facebook pages, YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, websites, you name it. We're live. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please leave comments if you're watching via video. We love it. Hopefully, we're going to have a call-in line eventually so we can take call-ins. That will be super fun. So we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we love our fans or participants that watch the show, because tonight is all about Friday the 13th. Is that how it goes? There's a story behind how they got that too, and it's kind of simple. Maybe Nick will know about that. I'm not for sure, but we're gonna be talking about Friday the 13th, folklore, the movie, serial killers, all that fun stuff. So if you are watching via video from StreamYard, please, if you start making comments and it comes up Facebook user, doesn't show your name, doesn't show your picture, please go to StreamYard.com/Facebook. Give StreamYard permission to use your name and image so we know who we're talking to. And we appreciate any kind of participation that you put forth in this next hour. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's a new time for What the Frick Live. We've been on Friday nights, well, Wednesdays and Friday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this is a whole new time, everybody. Yeah. Friday nights only for right now. We'll see what happens after my son's basketball season.
No, super Friday busy. Night, 7 o'clock. Come join us. 7 o'clock Eastern.
Yes. So thank you, everybody, for coming on. I'm going to introduce our guests now. We have Nick Mulae that's with us. He's a paranormal investigator for at least 17 years. He's investigated many haunted locations. He's been on What the Frick Live before. He's a good friend of mine. He's super talented. He is also a member of Midnight Paranormal Society. He produces scary stories presented in the dark, which he had me do something. I sound too hillbilly. I couldn't listen to myself. I sound too hillbilly. I think it's Blard's Burgers is the story I read for him. And also, he's going to be having a new audio series coming out. And he has the Nick Files. We're going to bring him on right now. Nick Mulae. Hello, Nick. Welcome to the show.
What up, Nick?
Hi, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Don is missing in action right now, but when he pops in, I will make sure I'll do a little introduction to him, because you help him. Well, I'll just say it. You help him with the podcast too, which is also video podcast. It's on YouTube, FearFans. And this is what got us started with the Friday the 13th movies and all these horror movies that y'all love. And I love your freaking hat too, if you're watching. I got to buy one of those. But thank you for coming on the show. Is there anything I missed? Maybe possibly introduce yourself.
I think you got most of it down, to be honest.
Awesome. Well, Nick Mulae, he's here with us tonight. Yay! So, Nick, I'll start this off and then I'll let Rick. So you have some background in horror movies and doing this FearFans movie reviews and everything like that. Tonight is Friday the 13th, and I'm obsessed with it because I was born on that day at 11:36 p.m. My mom could have waited 20 more minutes and had me on Saturday the 14th, but she didn't. If anything's going to happen, it's going to happen to me. My whole family will say that. Rick, get to know that. Rick, understand that right now. Rick's my real boss. He's my daytime boss.
Okay.
So, Rick, if it's going to happen to me, it's going to happen.
When that lightning strikes, I'll be right next to you.
So thank you. So what got you started in all these, because you're much younger than me, I know that, but what got you started in all these horror movies and reviews?
Well, when it comes to the horror genre, it really goes back to an early part of my childhood. And additionally, this is what also eventually got me into the paranormal field, was growing up in the mid to late 90s. I was a toddler in those days, but surprisingly, my parents got to let us watch the X-Files series, which, at that time, was still relatively brand new. And yes, the genre changed a lot of times throughout the season, but it was really my first, experience when it came to horror films and that kind of particular subject. And as I've always put it, it's like I was climbing through the ranks of like how to try to become a hardcore horror fan. So you had that. And then as I was growing up, I started watching a lot of the, and I still am a big fan to this day. I was into a lot of the Godzilla movies growing up. And by the time I reached my teens, it's like I still had the interest, but I wanted to experience more into that. So I started learning about these slasher movies out there. We're talking like Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, etc. You name it. It's like I was just drawn immediately by it. I mean, it was just it was. I think it was. I think in some way it was like one of the first real subjects out there that really caught my attention. Other than the only other thing I was really fascinated growing up with was weather and storms. So,
Storm Chaser.
Yeah, I should have also said.
I would love to do that.
I'm not exactly, but I'm kind of like a part-time storm chaser too. Of course, that's another story. But what was so amazing about when I got into the horror genre was that it also eventually got me interested in wanting to get into filmmaking. Because by the time I got into high school, I mean, not necessarily right at the beginning of high school, but started my junior year, I started going to film class and started learning a lot of the techniques of how film, worked. And, as a result, I've made a couple projects of my own. And with a lot of what I've done, I've even been able to work on a few actual movies, specifically in the genre. And, it's a lot of work. It definitely did take a number of years for me to get up to that rank, but, it's always been a lot of fun. And I have no regrets whatsoever.
Well, we kind of have a partner in crime right now when it comes to FearFans podcast on YouTube and some projects that you're all doing. We got Dunn, Elmi. He's signed on now, so let's bring Dunn to the show.
Hey, Don! Hey, what up, Don?
Look at his collection behind him.
Yeah.
Kind of jealous.
Years in the making. Years in the making.
Welcome to What the Frick Live. Appreciate you being here. Nick just told us why he got involved in all this horror films and all this stuff. Can you go ahead and tell us why you're involved in it? What draws your eye to these kind of productions?
Well, what drew me to it? When I was 5 years old, my family had Jaws playing on TV. I have the poster in the background, but I know 5 years old may seem like a young age, but instead of being terrified of it, I absolutely loved it, and I was drawn to like study film ever since. And it started with horror films, then it grew to action and so on.
Awesome. Rick?
I was thinking about them talking. I grew up I was born in the early 80s and different time, right? We watched things, we did things, a lot of the parents seemed to be around a little less. We were had some freedom. So I remember watching these slasher movies and early on. And Friday the 13th was always my favorite. So I still remember very vividly some of those scenes, and it terrified you, right? As a kid, it's just, oh my God, like I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight. But then the next night I'm watching the same movie over and over again. So I've seen multiple of those movies every time. And I don't know if I know this to be true, but the idea of like the slasher, right? Where you have a killer and he goes and he murders the town or, everybody. And then there's always like one really beautiful, innocent girl at the end that happens to take him down. Did that start with Friday the 13th? Do you guys know, was that like the original, that theme?
It's an early example, yes, but I don't believe that's what started it. There were ones that were before Friday the 13th, where Alien, Sigourney Weaver was a final girl. She survived.
And let's not forget, too, also Jamie Lee Curtis from Halloween. She was the classic version of what's the so-called final girl in these films, which also inspired the term Scream Queen.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Oh, yeah. Scream Queen. I forgot about that. But Halloween got kind of like criticized a lot, saying that they were taking those ideas from Halloween, right? Didn't they get scrutinized for a long time there, or part 2 or something? Was it part 2 that Alice?
It might have been. What I can say, though, is that, when Friday the 13th came out in the summer of 1980, Halloween obviously took, it was the best, best slasher film of its time. But for Halloween, as great as the film it still is today, was basically, it was very different from Friday the 13th. It wasn't violent, it wasn't bloody, it wasn't gory. Friday the 13th was the complete opposite of Halloween.
Yeah,
I think that's why I was drawn to Friday the 13th growing up. For me, you remember playing like Street Fighter, and then Mortal Kombat came out?
Oh, Street Fighter, yes.
And the game was cool, right? But the real cool part of the game was at the end when you got to perform the fatality and like do something crazy. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm watching this, at 9, 10 years old. When it comes to Friday the 13th, the things that stick in my mind are the legit murders that occurred. I can remember some of those where he picks up the sleeping bag and he bangs it against the tree. That is etched in my brain. Like, I'll never forget that. Like, watching that, like, oh my God, like, I shouldn't be watching this, but I gotta watch it again.
Yeah, part 7. That's what that was.
That was part 7.
That part 7? I go back to Kevin Bacon though, with the blood in that gash.
That was the original one, yeah, with Kevin Bacon in it.
That's what I think of when I think of Friday the 13th. The gash.
Oh yeah.
In the neck.
A lot of people think that was his first film, but he did one other film before that. He was a big part in Animal House.
Oh, Animal House? Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. Footloose. When did Footloose come out? And Tremors.
Footloose came out a little bit later in the 80s. Tremors came out in 1990. So
Tremors was 1990? Golly.
That's another
Critters.
Movie. Critters, 1986.
Don knows the years with these movies.
That's impressive.
I mean, I know him too, but he knows it better than I do, to be honest.
I want to ask this: when it comes to Friday the 13th and the movies, I want to love the storyline of the movies. And looking back on them, I think the knock would be that the plot, right? Like it doesn't flow as maybe easily as you'd like it to. Was there ever an ending? Like, has it ever truly ended? And I know, he fought Freddy and then he goes to hell and he does this. Has the movies ever ended at this point?
Like the franchise itself ended? I believe they've been trying to work on a new one that takes place like in the winter. So Jason killing people in snow. So that could be a new one. Yeah, but
and the story continues. It's not like a reboot of the series. It's like an actual continuation.
I'm not sure if it's a sequel or a reboot. I mean, I know they've been working on this since the reboot from 2009. That's what that was.
And there was also originally going to be made. There was originally a plan to make a television series. In fact, of not. I know, of course. I know Don, you and I weren't around for it at first when it came out, but I know in the late '80s, early '90s, they made a television series called Friday the 13th, the series. But despite the title of it, it has no connection to the movie franchise whatsoever. Jason doesn't ever show up once in any of the episodes. So this new series that they were going to make, it was going to have Jason in it, but it wasn't just going to be like the movies where he just goes out and kills teenagers with his machete or with whatever he had. They were going to actually explain more about Jason's origins, because you find it like, and I don't mean to make any spoilers, but the first Friday the 13th, it wasn't Jason at all. It was his mother. But you never really found out, saying, okay, we know who his mother was, and we know Jason is, of course, whatever happened to his father, or if he had any other family members. So they originally wanted to dig in deeper into the Voorhees family, but unfortunately, the series that they wanted to put together, it never materialized.
Don't you think it was based off the time, though, Nick, where we have Carrie that had a weird relationship with her mother? We got Psycho that he had a real weird relationship. It always leads to mothers. And if you want to talk about narcissistic psychopaths, it's like they always have this disconnected relationship with your mother. Don't you think that they were just still playing in with that theme to kind of what works? Like, even just in paranormal reality TV. Like some of this stuff, they don't get new cast members. They go with the same because that's what's working. Do you think that Friday the 13th, they continued in that genre of son and mother disconnect because that's what was working previously in these other films?
You go.
Sorry, everybody's
I was waiting for. I saw Don was going to say something.
Panel.
Well, he Jason certainly did have a crazy relationship with his mother, no doubt. Where I mean, she was like very like had that sort of overprotection kind of aspect, as that was in that wasn't Psycho, that was in certain other films, but in this one she took it to like to the extreme as far as revenge. But then her path of revenge was being basically taken over by Jason because of his love for her. So.
Well, do you think it's because he finally saw her? He didn't see her for many years. How did he get to that shack? Is my question too.
Well, there are theories about it. The one that I like to believe is that Jason, they said that he had drowned, but yet they never found his body. So I would like to think that he had survived the drowning, washed up somewhere on another part of Crystal Lake, and just grew up in the wilderness where everyone thought he was dead. So that would explain that. Well, I think that would explain
turn, West Virginia, wrong turn.
Well, and also too, you see in early, like when you have chances of seeing it, you also notice that Jason is also deformed. Like he had like some type of, I don't know if it was hydrocephalus or
yes, that's what it was.
Yeah, it was like this enlarged head that he had. So he not only, escaped from, getting caught or whatever cases, he may have survived the drowning, but he probably hid in the shack so he could hide his deformities from society.
Yeah, that's right. There's actually a name for his deformity. I got to look that up, but apparently
it's
it actually
hydrocephalus.
Yeah, hydrocephalus. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, where there's like water swelling in the head or something. Like
it's water in the brain.
Yes, that's right.
All right.
Yeah, and as far as his immortality, like how that works, there's theories about that too. A lot of people think it's a curse. A lot of people think it's like
supernatural,
that kind of
thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
When it comes to Friday the 13th, right? We have this, superstition that exists. And are you guys familiar with kind of back where that comes from? And can you speak to like why we as a society are, think about Friday the 13th as this unlucky day?
Well, like the number 13, like there been like we just have like a long history of like bad things taking place that surround the number 13. I mean, hey, we're at the point where we don't have even the number 13 on floors, the 13 floors in buildings.
And that's right. Airplanes too. There's no 13th row in airplanes.
Yeah. There you go.
But here's my thing: is do we think 13th is so bad because the number 12 is so perfect in some ways? Like the calendar is 12 months, the quarters are 12 weeks. We got 12 disciples. The 13th would possibly have been Judas, which is, does it go this far back?
Well, and I think we always assume that Jesus was crucified on a Friday.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I have to admit, that's a really good question. So it very is likely, because considering with anything that's really associated with the number 13, that's been going on for centuries, throughout probably most of our history, that 13 has really proven to be a very unlucky number.
There was all in I should have done better research here, but when I think back to Friday the 13th, this is a French king. What is it? The Templar Knights were making a bunch of money, had this whole banking system throughout Europe where people were going on the going down to Jerusalem. What is that? The Crusades. And at some point he put him up on a trumped up trial and, I think killed the leader and happened on Friday the 13th. So I think vaguely somewhere deep in my memory, I think it's tied into that, or at some point that happened on Friday the 13th and maybe that's where it came from. But I'm sure there's a lot of people on Google that could say, nah, this dude doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But
it says one of the world's oldest legal documents, which may or may not have superstitiously omitted a 13th rule from its list. Others claim that the ancient Sumerians, who believed the number 12 is to be a perfect number, considering the one that followed it decidedly non-perfect. One of the most popular theories, however, links Friday the 13th with the fall of the fearsome group of legendary warriors of the Knights Templar.
Feels good.
So they use 13, and it says, for the Templars, the end began in the early morning hours of Friday, October the 13th. October the 13th.
Oh, wow.
In 1307. So you got 13, then you got 7. All these number people, that's all into these number stuff. I don't do that often. But secret documents have been sent by courier throughout France. The papers included details and whispers of black magic and scandalous sexual rituals. They were sent by King Philip of France, a monarch whose preceding years had launched attacks on the Lombards, a powerful banking group, Lombards, and France's Jews. It's always the Jews, right? Who had expelled so he could confiscate their property for their depleted coffers.
Yeah, I mean, it always ties into money and power, right?
Money and bloodlines.
Oh yeah.
Money and bloodlines.
So yeah, they were the Templars were, they developed a banking system, and you like learn about what they did. It was pretty cool to where you could travel, they would support travelers where you could basically take, your first almost banking system where you could drop in money at point A, take this slip of paper that they had signed and pick it up at point B. And, they took a little cut of that, obviously. And so, yeah, the French king was like, no, I want in on some of that. Let me make up something, and just, ended this reign of, they were successful, very profitable for probably centuries with this system. And then went ahead and just took it all.
What came of them is that Philip put them in a prison for 2 years, and 50 of them were burned at the stake in 1310.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Here, Grandmaster Mulae, kind of like Nick Mulae.
It's like, I mean, I've heard of certain things, like when it comes to some,
full circle
events, but I've never really heard too much of this, especially going back when it involves the number 13.
So do you think the Friday the 13th was based off just superstition or possibly events that took place in history and in real life crime, like true crime, murder, mysteries, like the Girl Scouts and some other camping murders that's happened throughout the years before Friday 13 came out? But the Girl Scout murders I'm interested in because it's been re-released in some documentaries and stuff, and it happened on a Tuesday, June the 13th, and Jason Voorhees was born on Thursday, June the 13th. So yep. I was interested in possibly linking, did they truly go forward? Because that was like just like the Idaho 4 that we're all talking about right now that happened in Idaho. That was like Idaho. The talk of the 70s, early 80s was this Girl Scout murders.
I did a little research on that just from, for this. I wasn't familiar. And I mean, that's just anything involving kids. I just, like tears start pouring. But it's cool that it's ended. Like that came to an end. And, the DNA, what we've been able to do to prove that people did or didn't commit murders that and sometimes have been, been decades to free the names or, in certain cases, punish people who did it. But in that case, the guy that they knew who had did it but could never prove it, they finally got the DNA evidence, which I think is exciting. That happened recently where they were able to prove that guy had done it. The one that they had put him on trial, and the whole system was rigged to where the jurors didn't get like all this very relevant evidence. So they, let him walk, where anybody who knew what was going on, like, no, dude, this guy clearly did it. But the DNA evidence got him very recently, actually.
Yeah, I actually have the page up right now from Wikipedia about the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders. And yeah, I mean, there were no other suspects, obviously, that were, involved in that in this horrific murder that occurred. So it's unfortunate that they had to let him walk away. But in the end, he didn't get to have a taste of freedom for long, because 2 years later he died in 1979. So he didn't even get to live that long afterwards. So if you want, for the families, if you want to kind of call it a sense of justice, I mean, so be it, because at least they didn't have to see this guy. They may have not been able to either lock him up or execute him or whatever the case was, but at least he was no longer on the streets permanently.
Well, we got a lot of resemblance time things that happen in Friday the 13th. And some of the 13 numbers, I remember this from many years ago, is that Jason Voorhees has 13 letters in his name. Jeffrey Dahmer has 13 letters in his name. And Charles Manson has 13 letters in his name. Charles Manson's actually from my hometown. People don't know that. Ashley gets actually,
Oh, man.
I'm getting ready to do a project on him this summer with Toledo Paranormal up there. But anyway, we have these murders that happen all the time on the 13th. Like the Idaho 4 was November the 13th.
Holy shit. I had no idea.
Yeah, it was the 13th. And so, we have what movie was it? I wrote it down, that Alice, when she survived the next year, was it part 4 with Alice? When she died in the very beginning.
Yeah, it was part 2.
Part two.
You have Pamela Voorhees' neck or head is in the fridge and stuff. Does that come from Dahmer? Like, I honestly believe that the whole Friday the 13th industry, or whatever you want to call them, is coming from actual serial killers.
It's kind of, in a way, I mean, I can't say for sure if that's the case. However, there's always that case, because there are several cases where it comes to like some of our serial killers in the past where they've watched those movies and they get that thrill. They get the adrenaline from watching that kind of stuff. So what was originally something that may have just been something we only imagined in movies, unfortunately, becomes a reality. And it's literally truly something, out of a nightmare. So like you brought up with Jeffrey Dahmer, that's a classic example, like what he did. I don't know if he got it from that movie, but the results are very similar.
It could have been.
Yeah.
You're sitting there writing a movie. Where are you going to take your inspiration from? But the shit that's going on. Sorry, radio.
It's okay. You're fine.
That's going on the that you're seeing on the news. So obviously, I think the inspiration can just come from the nonsense that humanity's doing to each other. At the time.
There was I'm just going to throw in a quick example. There was a slasher film that was released around the same time Friday the 13th came out, called Maniac, which is still to this day another classic slasher film. And the director who made that one, that was his intention. He said what he was trying to do when he was making this movie was trying to basically build up a combination and real life basis of real life serial killers who were on the news at that time. So killers like David Berkowitz or John Wayne Gacy, to add as a few examples.
Yeah. And there was another film that was released around the time when Friday the 13th was just starting up, that Tom Savini had worked on, because he worked on the Friday the 13th movies as well. It was called The Burning, which is inspired by the whole Cropsy Maniac. It's similar in some way to Friday the 13th because of the whole, something terrible happened in the past that's come back for revenge.
It's at a campsite once again. They're stalking teenagers.
Yeah, David
if
Alexander.
We want to talk about that too, I'm wearing a Stephen King sweatshirt, everybody. And The Shining came out in 19. Wasn't The Shining the film that gave Friday the 13th the run for their money? Like they competed big time on the same year, 1980, 1981?
1981, yeah.
And so you're going back in past again, something that's haunting and coming back forward and taking over and going forward and killing a family.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Which has been also super popular. I hate to say that, in even just modern day right now, true crime, like husbands or it is, I hate to say it, guys, it's mostly husbands that go crazy and kill their whole families. We got a couple of them right now in our news. That one family, it was 4 kids and a wife and the mother-in-law. He killed them all.
Jeez.
What the hell are they doing
there? That just brought up another case, not necessarily a film, but it does revolve around that same case. And Don, you know this all too well, as I'm sure you guys remember, over almost 10 years ago, there was also the Slender Man stabbing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a movie, but it was an obsession over something that was fictional, and it drove these kids to nearly murder their friend in the backwoods of Wisconsin.
Oh, and also, I just want to throw this in here real quick too. I didn't forget about this, but the Chris Watts case that came out with his wife and children and things. So do you think that these horror films are giving people, like, do you think individuals are watching these films and giving ideas, or do you think this is just built in them in the beginning?
I think a lot of people watch this stuff and, decide that, hey, I'm gonna, they could, it's something psychologically, right? It's like what takes this, you take this inspiration and you actually act on it. And I wanted to just jump in. Brian, right? The dude that definitely, I don't want to say definitely, because I guess he hasn't been convicted yet, but there's a lot of evidence that points to the guy, Brian, that tall, skinny white guy with bushy eyebrows with the Idaho 4 case. He was sociopathic tendencies and took inspiration from Dahmer and Manson and those guys. Like, he speaks about it. So clearly, like, there's a condition that we have, and it's probably, mostly men, to say, oh, a lot of us are like, oh man, what if I did this? Or you think about it, but what is it in our system and our brains that make us act on this, where, the vast majority of humans would be like, okay, you know what, maybe that's a little extreme. There's a couple people that just go out and say, okay, let's do this. Sorry, Don, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like people who commit these acts in real life are not, I think it's more than just them being inspired by movies. I think it's just also that they were already very disturbed. There could be something, it could be something psychological in them. Then they are just looking for ideas, different ways to like kill, not just in film, but from literature and the other sources. But like I've said before on my podcast, that movies do not create real life violence. Movies have long been inspired by real life violence.
Yeah.
If I could throw in too, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
cut
go
you
ahead,
off
Nick.
this time. It's that I think sometimes also the reason why, I mean, I would say like 99% of most people who watch those movies, they may have those crazy thoughts, but they'll never pursue it. They may use it for like maybe a future movie idea or something like that. Like if they're actually inspired to be involved in filmmaking, it's usually, that 1%, people who have that disturbed thoughts patterns or whatever that actually may make them want to commit such violence. But another, perhaps among that 1%, is if you look at some of the other slasher movies that were made throughout the 80s, not every slasher film is always the result of, a teenage prank gone wrong or, whatever the case is. Some there's a few slasher movies where some of these killers had abusive childhoods, and some of these people who watch these movies, they can relate to it, and they think, oh, so if that person grew up to become a killer and did all this stuff to avenge his childhood or whatever, then I'm going to do the same exact thing. So it's a type. There are also kind of movies where people can sometimes relate to it in some way. I mean, even those with bad childhoods, a lot of people do eventually overcome it, but there's always still a few people out there who believe that this is how their lives should be living because they're inspired from a film like that.
Speaking of childhoods, Jason Voorhees' childhood, how did he even know how to communicate at all? Like, how did he? I mean, he couldn't even communicate, period. And he ends up being in this shack. How would he know to have these survival skills? And how could he ever even communicate with somebody?
I think like before his death, I mean, he was able to communicate before his apparent death as a kid. But just later on, I felt like as he grew up in the wild, he himself just became more feral. Like he in terms of how he just doesn't speak like people. He just it's like, people left me to die on that lake. Now I got nothing to say.
Yeah, and also there was, Don, I don't know if you remember, I think it might have been in the remake, or correct me, but there was a flashback at one point where, because people always wonder, well, how on earth did Jason even supposedly drown? Like, how did he ended up in Camp Crystal Lake to begin with? Because you see in the film, he's out in the middle of the lake. You're wondering how he got there. Well, yes, we found out that he didn't know how to swim. He wasn't a very good swimmer, but it turns out that because of his deformities, he was bullied by the other kids. And at one point, they grabbed him and they threw him in, knowing that he couldn't swim well. And that's what supposedly caused the demise. But I think that's also what caused, basically, not only for him to become feral and animalistic, but I think that's what also eventually caused him to snap. I mean, yes, part of it was also because his mother was killed and he probably secretly witnessed it, but I think it was all that rage that he probably had within him from his childhood that he just snapped and decided to murder people.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, you're referring to the flashback sequence in Freddy versus Jason.
That's the one. Yes. Thanks. Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Well, it could be that too, but we find out his mother did majority of the killings in the first two part 1, part 2, right? Did she go into part 3?
In just the first one.
I think she loses her head at the end of part 1.
Yeah.
Was it part 1? I keep thinking she was in part 2.
Yeah, it was part 1 when they did.
One.
Just the only time you ever see her in the second film is her head, and that's it.
Yep. And she killed 9. She killed 9, I believe.
Let's see.
I think there's a website.
Are you counting the murders in your mind?
Yes.
That's impressive.
I know that is very impressive.
Yeah, see, I never really count them myself, so he knows what he's doing.
Hold on, I think it's 9. I'm
7.
looking it up right now.
I got
Listen this in the film: 1,
8.
Barry, Claudette, Annie,
8.
Ned, Jack, Marcy, Steve, Bill, Brenda, Pamela dies. So yeah, that's part 1. Yeah. So
it was 9.
There's 9, 10. Yeah, there's 9. I was right. Woo. Okay.
Chat GPT told me there's 7.
GPT's wrong.
7? No.
No, there's more than that.
Here, Barry gets stomach stabbed with a hunting knife. Claudette gets neck stabbed with a hunting knife. Here's all hunting knives. It's all Thrasher. Annie, throat slash with hunting knife. Ned, throat slash with hunting knife. Jack, neck impaled with an arrow. Marcy, face struck with an axe. Steve, chest stabbed with a hunting knife. Gosh, this is probably going to get kicked off Facebook. Bill, throat slashed with a hunting knife, impaled through multiple places. Gosh, she did not like Bill. And Brenda says unknown.
Yeah, like judging from the bruises, it's highly implied that she was just beaten to death off screen.
Yeah, because she didn't take as much damage as some of the other victims were. But it's just funny how it was all through a hunting knife before even the machete was ever used.
That's right. And Emily, don't worry about
the machete was used on her. So then Jason, that's interesting. Jason takes the weapon that killed his mother and uses that on everybody else.
That's right. Yeah, and don't worry about being banned from Facebook. We talk about stuff like this all the time in our podcast.
Yes, we do.
And I've never gotten any complaints from Facebook, so you're good.
Which is the one where
Don.
the 2 people
I live on the edge, and I'm a Friday 13th baby.
2 teenagers going at it in a sleeping bag, right? And one of them gets their head cut off. Like that's a memorable one.
Oh, which one?
That's the Girl Scout murders too. Well, not that they got their heads cut off, but they
were
killed
they were found in their sleeping bags.
Sleeping bags.
Yep.
With a thunderstorm that night, so the other camp counselors could not hear if they screamed or anything. So.
Which is those girls were so young, and it's crazy. I mean, it was a different time. It was the 70s.
Yeah.
But like, I got a 6-year-old, and you're going out camping, and sleeping in
The beginning of that, they found a note warning that they were going to kill some campers, and they blew it off as the 70s. They blew it off as like it was a joke.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah.
Different time.
Sorry, I didn't mean I interrupted that you were asking about I'm sorry, but
you're good.
You know what? I was just looking this up, by the way, guys, because like Emily's, like you said before about like if there were other about other crimes that have occurred on Friday the 13th. There was one other crime I found where it occurred before even the Girl Scout murders ever occurred.
Is it in Scotland or Europe?
No, it's in England.
England.
It was Southport, Lancashire, England. That was back on Friday the 13th, April 13th, 1973. And oh my God, I mean, even just look at the victims here were even younger. They were like between the ages of 9 months and 4.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of stabbings and stuff that's happened in Kentucky, Dayton, Ohio area, Florida, going out towards the west on the 13th. Not necessarily Friday the 13th, but the 13th date. And people are over the last decade, and people are saying that this is a serial killer. Nobody's been caught. All of these stabbings are still unsolved.
Did
And that's why they were trying to tie in the 13th murders in Idaho to this in the beginning, that he was a serial killer. And they're kind of following the same pathway as, what's his face? What's his name? He represented himself in court. Ted Bundy.
Oh, Ted Bundy. Yeah, that's who it was. Yep.
Ted Bundy.
We'll see. We wake up in the morning, check the news, and see if anybody got stabbed today.
Yeah, 13th. Friday 13th. Everybody check the news tomorrow.
I just thought of something else that involved the number 13 involving murders. If you look at like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, his official count was 13 victims.
That's right. Yeah, he was a bad one.
Yeah.
Real bad one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Like, wondering if they actually did make a movie out of him, because they seem to make all the time. Obviously, they always make movies about it. These based on the story of these killers. You know, we've had movies about let's see. What am I thinking about? There's one called the one about John List that I came across recently.
John List. He did his whole family. He was the accountant, and that was scary because he left funeral music playing in the house. So when the detectives enter the house, they hear that music. Then they walk into the living room, and all of his family is shot and killed. And he put a cover and stuff over them in the living room.
Yeah,
it's creepy.
But
that's The Watcher. You watched The Watcher on Netflix? The Watcher?
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. I gotta see that, because there's other ones that I've seen in the past, like Gacy. You know, John Wayne Gacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like there've been several movies made about that, and oh man, this is like
the Watcher movie is based off a true story, but they also intertwined the List murders in there with it.
Oh.
So it's based off two true stories, and they just interweaved it together. But John List is creepy. That house is burnt down. Speaking of burning, the camp where these Girl Scouts were, it burned twice since the murders happened. Ooh. And then we got in, what is it? It's my favorite one. I can't remember what part it is. And I quit watching the Friday the 13th films after Jason was caught on fire for like a minute. And then the whole house blew up. That's the best explosion I've ever seen.
Part 7.
Part 7.
Part 7
I stopped watching after that. But it's sad through these series is that the camp had caught on fire, and they brought it back as Blood Camp, or they were calling it Blood Camp at one time.
Camp Blood, I think.
Something. Yes. Camp Blood. Yeah. And so, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit here everywhere, but the fires that are associated with the Girl Scout murders, and then possibly also depicted later in Friday the 13th. I think they went off on it.
They did.
Used it.
Yeah, they definitely used that, because in Friday the 13th, the truck driver who drives Annie to the camp explained that right after those murders, there were a bunch of fires. No one knows who did any of them, and then they had to close the camp down again because the water was bad. So I'm guessing poisoned.
Yeah, like contaminated water of some sort, and it's just there's just such a similarity, like, because I really did I really after when you first told us, Emily, I really did a lot of research on like the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders, and I thought, aside from, because Friday the 13th, I think it takes place in New Jersey, if I'm correct, right, Don?
Well, yeah. Rick?
Yes.
Isn't there a Voorhees, New Jersey? Rick's in New Jersey. Rick's in New Jersey.
So when we were shopping I have a trucking company, and when we were shopping for some land, make a little home for ourselves in South Jersey, found this perfect little spot in Voorhees Township, New Jersey. So the first thing that comes to my mind is, oh my God, that's really a thing. So yeah, you send some piece of mail to my shop, and it's Voorhees.
So we gotta get Rick a Voorhees hat now.
We're not joking. I just looked it up right now. Wow.
Do they have a lot of Jason stuff there, Rick?
No. There will now.
A missed opportunity.
Yeah, camp is it Crystal Lake? Where is that supposed to be? Is there does it represent a specific area?
I think it's supposed to be definitely East Coast. I mean, I think it could very well be New Jersey.
I thought it was Alabama because they worried about alligators or something, wasn't it?
I just remember.
Or was it filmed in Alabama?
Right back.
Oh, he's good. He always has something basically, so he's gonna go grab it.
Was it filmed in Alabama? Because I remember something about a gator man. Like they got somebody local there to shoot alligators in case they got attacked by alligators. that could be just me reading though. I don't.
They take a cruise ship to Manhattan. Now it took some creative liberty. Hold on.
Here, summer 1980, Camp Crystal Lake, and it says Wessex County, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah, and that's not far from me.
Yeah, we were right.
Wow.
That's incredible.
That's when we should have had the music playing. You know.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't have that.
Yep, and it says on the shirt, swimming, boating, adventure, and they forgot to put down murder.
To make it sound so innocent.
Yeah. While we have time, right? For anybody who's listening, for you guys, what if they tuned in to your podcasts, what are we going to hear? Give us a little.
Well, when we on our podcast, we basically go over like the basic info about the film and like what we love about it and connections that it has with other movies. Like I've talked about in the previous episode on Tuesday, Nightmare on Elm Street. We talked about how it was Johnny Depp's feature film debut and how this took place. This film was made like before his work with Tim Burton, his constant, frequent work with Tim Burton, and also before he was hired by Disney to play Captain Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean.
About 21 Jump Street. That's my Johnny Depp. 21 Jump Street is how I was introduced to him.
Oh, yeah.
What movie are you covering next?
We are covering on this coming Tuesday at 8:30 Central. We are covering Nightmare on Elm Street 2 because a lot of people love to like what we had to say about Nightmare on Elm Street. So we decided why not start doing the sequels now.
Okay.
I can't watch Freddy. Something about attacking somebody in your dreams or something like freaks me out. Like I watched one. You remember Saturday Night Nightmares?
I knew you were gonna have that with you, Doc. Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, there he goes.
Do you all remember Saturday Night Nightmares on USA? This is the 80s. Rick, hopefully you know.
Nope.
Okay,
I remember Are You Afraid of the Dark?
We had Are You Afraid of the Dark, Saturday Night Nightmares, and then we got the guy Gilbert Godfrey afterwards, Saturday Night Nightmares.
Gilbert Godfrey.
Yes. But
you do remember that show, Are You Afraid of the Dark, though? That was
Love
something
it.
else I should have brought up earlier.
Nickelodeon.
I love that show. Yes.
Yeah,
That was Campfire. It was Campfire Stories. Here we go.
It was
yeah. We definitely got to cover that on the podcast too, Nick.
But what was I saying about this? I watched one little clip when I was young. My mom had every Stephen King book. Like she sat and said Tommy Knockers, sang that little poem to me at nighttime to go to bed. And then she wondered why I was so afraid to sleep in my bed for the longest time. But I watched a little clip of Freddy being in a dollhouse. Like there's one of the movies that they're in a dollhouse and she goes to sleep and she goes back into this dollhouse. The dollhouse is in her room and like he shows up there. Freaked me out. I was like 8, 9 years old or something. Never watched a Freddy movie after that. Never.
Oh man.
So I got some questions. We got about 4 minutes left. I got some quiz questions.
Okay.
All right. So I got 4 of them. Let's see if we get through this, and then we'll tell everybody where they can find y'all. Okay.
Okay.
So original name was not Jason.
Nope.
It was not Jason. So what was the casting name or the character's name for Jason? The original name.
Oh man, this is kind of a tough one. I never.
It starts with a J.
Okay.
Imagine his name was just Jay.
Jay.
I'm gonna guess Julian.
Joshua.
Joshua.
I'm gonna go with I'll go with James.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah, Josh is right. Okay.
Oh, that's what.
So when Mrs. Voorhees dies, she gets her head chopped off.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody notice why she possibly had large and hairy hands?
I know this one.
Large and hairy hands. I think there was like a stunt double that had like when she had the head cut off. I think it was a stunt double playing him.
Actually, there's
the
more.
hands fly up on the screen and she falls down and they're hairy.
Yeah, well, there's more to it. I was going to add those hands, not necessarily a stunt double, Don. That's actually special effects maker Tom Savini with his hands going up.
Yeah,
isn't he Dawn of the Dead or something? Or
he worked on Dawn of the Dead previously.
Dawn of the Dead.
Yep, he did the zombie effects for it, and also he played one of the bikers in the end. Say goodbye, creep. Then takes his machete and Oh, man. Yeah, it was a great one.
That needs to be a t-shirt. So here's question number 3. What Halloween movie was produced to be in 3D? It's like one of the first 3D movies.
Which
I
Halloween
would
movie?
have originally thought Halloween 3, but I don't think so.
No, Halloween 3 wasn't. No.
No.
You mean the Halloween franchise, or do you mean like
No,
for
a Halloween movie that was put out to be pushed out into the public to be 3D movie first before.
Let's see. One of the earliest examples for horror films in 3D was Creature from Black Lagoon.
Okay, but which Halloween movie? Or
I'm
not
trying to
Halloween, I'm sorry. Friday the 13th. I'm saying
Friday
Halloween.
the 13th.
Friday the 13th movie was produced to be in 3D.
Friday
I'm
the 13th.
sorry.
Yeah, part 3 in 3D, as they sometimes
Yeah,
would refer
part
to
3
it.
in 3D.
Yeah,
1983 3D movie.
It
Okay.
was the year. Go ahead.
My last one. Now, in one of the Jason movies, Friday 13th movies, they do telekinetic stuff, which I think they got from Firestarter. So there's only one actor, one person that's actually wore the Jason mask more than once. He's worn it twice. Who
Kane
was
Hodder.
that person?
Kane Hodder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo!
And we've met him too, by the way. We've met Kane Hodder, and I'll tell you right now, he has unbelievable strength. Like when you get a picture with, well, he doesn't do this anymore, but when we saw him, this was like over 10 years ago. When you got a picture with him, he put his hands around your throat, and it was just even when he's trying to be light, you could just feel this
like
incredible strength. But now, unfortunately, he doesn't do that anymore because not everybody's always, having fun with it.
Yeah, but I mean, seriously, he has like the build of like a bouncer or a wrestler. I mean, that's what he could have been if he wanted to. And like the grip he has when you shake his hand, that's no joke.
It's unbelievable.
Jason, like roided up at some point. He was nice and lean in those earliest films. And he got jacked later.
The 3D.
Later in the,
it was the 3D effect. Jason had to pump up after that.
Yeah,
I've always said a lot of times when it comes to the Friday the 13th franchise, because a lot of people always say eventually you don't get as scared as much because you know what's going to happen, and that's kind of like what it's been with me. I've always said from part 1 to part 4, I think that was like really the only films that were actually considered scary. It had a more serious tone to it because it really because you saw things change. Once you got to part 5 and beyond, you pretty much knew what was going. They were still gory, but you weren't as scared as much because you knew what was going to happen. So I think really when they called the 4th one the final chapter, some people said they should have ended it then, but at the same time, I think that was really the only time where part 1 to 4 were actually considered really scary to watch.
Right. Yeah. Some people believe it should have ended right there with Corey Feldman hacking Jason away.
But my conspiracy theory in this is Corey Feldman, the last chapter. It actually, we know what Jason really looks like because Goonies came out the year later, and and he was Sloth. All right, they stayed together, and that's my theory. Sloth is Jason.
Jason must have made some kind of amends with Corey Feldman.
Something happened there. Corey Feldman is the link of it all. So my son's stepping in real quick too, and this is our first time on radio. He wants to say hello.
No,
again.
I don't want to.
You don't?
Over.
Hello.
Okay, 3 minutes.
3 minutes, promise. No overdue, please. I'm starving.
He's starving. So
we're live, whatever.
he's always starving. He's 13. So there we go. Friday the 13th. He's always starving. He's 13. But we'll let you go, Nick and Dawn, real fast. Before we let you go, can you please let everybody know where we can find you? I have the details in our description too, and on your YouTube pages and Facebook pages. But just please let everybody know where they can find you all.
Well, I always put the podcast linked to the Things Network on Facebook, Nick's Facebook, and also on my Facebook page as well, and also my YouTube channel. You just type in Don Elmi, and that's where I have the playlist of all the past episodes as well.
Nick,
and you can also find me too. Obviously, I'm part of a whole bunch of networks, obviously, but you could find me, basically the same way with Don. We do our shows on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn. I might have missed one other one, but I think I got most of them. So and not only do I do Fear Fans, I do a few other shows during the week, which I do on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, which you can catch on the Things Network for.
Awesome. Well, we'll let you go and close out the show. Thank you, Don and Nick. First time tonight on 107.7 FM in New Orleans. We appreciate you. Way to start out the first episode on a Friday the 13th. It's a good number for me. So we appreciate y'all. We'll let you go, and I'll see y'all next time.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
You as well.
All right, there we have it. What the Frick Live. Happy Friday the 13th.
So good.
How do you feel, Rick?
Besides the fact that I'm gonna have nightmares tonight, I feel pretty good. That was fun. Those two guys are very cool.
Oh, they are, and they're so much fun when it talks about other movies. I always slide in, and put a lot of comments and stuff when I catch them live if I'm home. It's been so busy with basketball schedule and everything. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight.
Yes.
We're on YouTube. Please hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channels that you see us on. Especially I'm promoting my own personal YouTube again. We're on Rumble. Please give us a positive sign there. We're here on 107.7 FM New Orleans. We'll be back next week talking about the documentary, The House in Between with Brad Cooney. If you have not watched that, it's on Prime, but it's on other places too. Part 1 and Part 2. Part 2 is fantastic. So we'll see you all next week right here, Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a